They found me 3 days after the battle, still strapped into the command cradle, still connected to Vigil's neural interface, still breathing in the thin chemical soup that passed for cockpit air. The rescue team had to cut through the hull to reach me because Vigil would not open the hatch. Vigil would not respond to external commands. Vigil would not stop walking. I am told I was screaming when they pulled me out. I do not remember that. I remember very little of those 3 days. In truth, only fragments, sensations, the echo of a presence that should not have existed but refused to let me go. The Medicae who examined me afterwards said the neural link had burned pathways into my brain that would never fully heal. They said I was lucky to be alive, lucky to be sane, lucky to have survived what no Sentinel pilot was ever meant to survive. I do not feel lucky. My name is Operative Second Class Yenna Morvain, formerly of the Armageddon 47th Recon Auxilia, currently classified as medically unfit for combat duty pending further evaluation. I have been asked to provide a full account of what occurred during the engagement at Sector Krath 7, with particular attention to the period following my commander's death. The Departamento Munitorum requires documentation of all anomalous equipment behavior. The Mechanicus has expressed interest in my testimony. Several parties whose identities I have not been told want to understand what happens when a Sentinel Walker loses its pilot mid-battle. I will tell you what happens. I will tell you everything. From the moment we dropped into that Emperor-forsaken wasteland to the moment they cut me free from Vigil's embrace. But I want it understood from the outset that what I experienced was not a malfunction. It was not a machine spirit gone rogue. It was something else entirely. Something the tech priests' manuals do not account for. Something that has left me changed in ways I am only beginning to understand. Vigil was a Sentinel-class walker of the standard Mars pattern configuration, assigned to me 18 months before Krath 7 as part of my elevation to Recon Operative. The designation was my choice, a small tradition among the 47th, naming our machines as though they were partners rather than tools. Vigil seemed appropriate for a scout walker, a machine whose purpose was to watch and wait and report what it saw. I did not know then how fitting that name would become. Piloting a Sentinel is not like driving a transport or manning a gun emplacement. The neural interface connects you to the machine's sensory systems, its motor functions, its basic diagnostic processes. When you walk in a Sentinel, you do not move legs, you feel legs, as though the walker's limbs were extensions of your own body. The cockpit becomes a second skin. The optical feeds become your eyes. After 18 months of continuous operation, I knew Vigil's responses better than I knew my own heartbeat. Every servo whine, every hydraulic pulse, every flicker of the Auspex display was as familiar to me as the sound of my own breathing. What I did not know, what none of us knew, was how deep that connection could go. The drop into Krath 7 was a standard planetary insertion. 12 Sentinels of the 47th, plus infantry support from the Vostroyan 88th, tasked with scouting an abandoned mining complex ahead of the main Imperial advance. Intelligence suggested minimal enemy presence, possibly some feral orc remnants from a previous campaign, nothing our combined force could not handle. Commander Streth led our Walker squadron from her own Sentinel, relentless, and her voice crackled through the Vox as we touched down in clouds of red dust. Standard dispersal pattern. Morvain, you take the eastern perimeter. Kos and Dreven, western approach. Everyone else, form up on me for the central advance. I acknowledged and guided Vigil toward my assigned sector, the walker's legs eating distance in long mechanical strides. The mining complex sprawled across the valley floor ahead, a tangle of rusted gantries and collapsed hab blocks and processing plants whose chimneys had not smoked in decades. The wind carried the smell of old metal and older death, that distinctive scent of places where humans once lived and no longer do. The first sign of trouble came 20 minutes into the sweep. Dreven's voice, tight with controlled fear. Contact Eastern Ridge. Multiple signatures, moving fast. They're not Emperor's Mercy, they're not orcs. Then, the shooting started. I will not give you a blow-by-blow account of the battle itself. I am not certain I could reconstruct it accurately, even if I wanted to. Combat compresses time in strange ways, and my memories of the first hour are fragmented, chaotic, a jumble of las fire and explosions and Vigil's autocannon thundering in my grip. What I can tell you is that we were ambushed by something that should not have been there, something the intelligence reports had not mentioned, something that tore through our infantry support like paper and forced the Walker squadron to fall back toward the central processing plant. Cultists. Hundreds of them, pouring out of tunnels we had not known existed, their bodies twisted by mutations that marked them as servants of the ruinous powers. They came in waves, heedless of casualties, screaming prayers to gods whose names burned the air. Some of them carried weapons. Many did not need to. Their flesh had become weapon enough, all claws and tentacles and mouths that opened in places mouths should not be. Commander Streth rallied us at the processing plant's main entrance, her sentinel standing tall against the horde, while the rest of us formed a defensive perimeter. Her voice never wavered, not even when Drevin's Walker went down under a mass of climbing bodies, not even when Koss's ammunition ran dry and he was forced to use Shadowfall's legs as crushing weapons. She kept us fighting, kept us together, kept us believing we might actually survive. She was still giving orders when the thing came for her. I do not know what it was. The Inquisition, in their subsequent debriefings, used words like possessed and demon-touched and warp-spawned abomination. But those are just labels, attempts to categorize something that defied categorization. What I saw was a figure that might once have been human, stretched and distorted until it stood 3 meters tall, its limbs jointed in too many places, its face a blank mask of scar tissue from which a single eye burned with light that was not light. It came through the cultist horde like they did not exist, moving with a speed that Vigil's Auspex could barely track, and it went straight for Relentless, straight for Commander Streth. I fired. We all fired, every functioning weapon in the squadron pouring destruction at that thing, and it did not matter. The rounds passed through it, or around it, or simply ceased to exist when they got close. It reached Relentless in 3 strides, and drove one elongated arm through the cockpit canopy like a blade through cloth. I heard Commander Streth die. Through the Vox, through the interface, through some channel I cannot name, I heard her final breath, and the wet sound of her body being torn from the command cradle. I heard Relentless scream, not a machine noise, not a servo failing or a system shorting, but a scream, high and keening and utterly wrong coming from a piece of military equipment. And then, Relentless fell silent, and the thing turned toward the rest of us, and Commander Streth's blood dripped from its arm in thick ropes that steamed where they struck the ground. What happened next? This is the part I have been asked to document. This is the part that interests the Mechanicus, that has the Munitorum clerks writing reports in triplicate, that has kept me confined to this Medicae facility for the 6 weeks since my rescue. This is what happens when a Sentinel Walker loses its pilot mid-battle. The neural interface surged. I felt it like a physical blow, a pressure behind my eyes that drove the breath from my lungs. Vigil's systems, already running hot from the sustained combat, suddenly demanded more from me than they ever had before. Not just motor control and sensory processing, but something deeper, something that reached into parts of my brain the interface was never meant to access. Images flooded my consciousness. Not memories, I knew my own memories, and these were not them. These were fragments of someone else's life, someone else's fears, someone else's final moments. Commander Streth's face as a child, the smell of her mother's cooking, the weight of her first las gun, the taste of fear on her tongue as she watched Relentless approach for her certification test. 18 years of experiences, compressed into a single instant, pouring through the interface like water through a broken dam, and beneath those memories, beneath the flood of borrowed life, something else. Something that felt like Vigil but was not Vigil, or was Vigil but was also more than Vigil had ever been. A presence in the machine that had always been there, sleeping, waiting, and had now been shocked into wakefulness by the death of another pilot, another presence, another fragment of human consciousness screaming its way into the void. Vigil moved. I did not command it. My hands were frozen on the control grips, my mind drowning in Commander Streth's dying thoughts. And Vigil moved on its own, stepping forward toward the thing that had killed my commander. I tried to stop it. Throne, help me, I tried. The interface was supposed to give me control, was supposed to make Vigil an extension of my will, but in that moment, my will was irrelevant. Something else had taken the reins, something that burned with a fury I had never felt from any machine, and Vigil was going to fight whether I wanted it to or not. The thing that killed Commander Streth turned to face us. Its single eye blazed brighter, and I felt its attention like a physical weight, a pressure on my soul that made me want to scream. It was looking at Vigil, looking at me, with something that might have been surprise, or recognition, or hunger. Vigil's autocannon roared. The shots that had passed harmlessly through the creature before now struck true, tearing chunks from its distorted flesh, driving it back step by staggering step. The presence in the machine was doing something, adjusting the firing patterns, altering the ammunition feed in ways I did not understand, consecrating each round with something that made them effective against what should have been invulnerable. The creature screamed. The sound was worse than the sight of it, a noise that existed in frequencies the human ear was not meant to process, and I felt blood trickling from my nose as the scream tore through my consciousness. But I also felt Vigil's satisfaction from a machine as it pressed the attack, as it drove the wounded abomination back toward the tunnel from which it had emerged. What followed was not a battle. It was an execution. Vigil fought with a precision I had never achieved in 18 months of partnership. Every movement calculated, every shot placed exactly where it would cause maximum damage. The thing that had killed Commander Streth tried to flee, tried to use its unnatural speed to escape, but Vigil would not let it. The Walker pursued it through the ruins of the mining complex, through tunnels that should have been too narrow for a Sentinel's frame, through spaces that bent and twisted in ways that hurt to perceive. I was a passenger in my own body. The interface held me locked in the command cradle, my hands moving on the controls in patterns I did not choose, my eyes fixed on optical feeds that showed me horrors I would have looked away from if I could. The presence in Vigil was using me as much as it was using the Walker, my reflexes, my training, my knowledge of combat tactics, but the will behind those actions was not mine. We caught the creature in a dead-end chamber deep beneath the complex. It turned to face us, its single eye dimmed now, its elongated form leaking fluids that hissed where they touched the stone floor. It spoke, then words in a language that predated humanity, syllables that crawled across my brain like insects, and I felt the presence in Vigil recoil from them, but it did not retreat. Vigil's autocannon had run dry during the pursuit. The Walker reached down with one massive manipulator arm and grabbed the creature by what might have been its throat. I felt the pressure in my own hand, felt the resistance of flesh that was not quite flesh, felt the thing struggling against a grip that should not have been strong enough to hold it, and then Vigil squeezed. The death of the creature was not clean. It was not quick. The presence in the machine wanted it to suffer, wanted it to feel what Commander Streth had felt, and it did not stop squeezing until there was nothing left to squeeze, until the thing that had killed my commander was a smear of impossible matter on the chamber floor. Only then did Vigil stop. I hung in the command cradle, gasping for breath, my body trembling with exhaustion I had not earned. The presence in the machine was still there. I could feel it like a second heartbeat, like a shadow of awareness just behind my own, but its fury had burned out. What remained was something quieter, something that felt almost like grief. Vigil, I managed. My voice was raw, my throat scraped dry by screams I did not remember making. What are you? The response came not in words, but in sensation. Images, emotions, memories that were not Commander Streth's and not mine. I saw the manufactorum where Vigil's chassis had been assembled, the prayers spoken over each component, the thousands of hours of machine tending that had preceded its activation. I saw the pilots who had come before me, 7 of them, spanning decades of service, and I felt their deaths, each one leaving a mark on whatever passed for Vigil's soul. Machine spirits. That is what the tech priests call them. The animating force within sanctified equipment. The blessing of the Omnissiah that makes our weapons and vehicles more than mere metal. I had always understood this as metaphor, as ritual language wrapped around mundane mechanical processes. I had not understood that it was literally true. Vigil was alive, had always been alive, in a way that the Mechanicus either did not know or chose not to acknowledge. Every pilot who had bonded with it through the neural interface had left something behind, some fragment of their consciousness that merged with the machine spirit and made it stronger, more aware, more capable of independent action. Commander Streth's death had been the final catalyst, the shock that pushed that accumulated awareness over some threshold I did not have words for, and now I was connected to it. Trapped in the command cradle, my neural pathways intertwined with something that had watched humanity from the inside of our machines for longer than I had been alive. The battle above was still raging. I could hear it through Vigil's audio sensors, the distant thunder of weapons fire, the screams of dying cultists, the crash of falling structures. My squadron, what remained of it, was still fighting, still dying, and I was trapped underground with a machine that would not let me go. "We have to help them," I said. "Vigil, please. We have to go back." The Presence considered this. I felt it weighing options, calculating probabilities, accessing tactical data I had not known the interface could provide. It showed me the situation above, 4 Sentinels still operational, the cultist horde thinning, the immediate threat contained but not eliminated. It showed me the tunnel network beneath the complex, the hidden chambers, the other things that waited in the darkness. The demon-touched creature had not been alone. It had been a vanguard, a scout, a test of our defenses. What waited below was worse. Vigil would not let me return to the surface. Instead, it carried me deeper into the tunnels, hunting the things that had thought themselves hidden, the cultist leaders and their warp-spawned masters, and the terrible altar they had built in a cavern that should not have existed beneath an Imperial mining complex. I watched through eyes that were mine and not mine as Vigil tore through them, as the Presence in the machine enacted a vengeance that transcended anything a mere soldier could have conceived. I do not know how long it lasted. Time lost meaning in those tunnels. There was only the hunt, the kills, the grim satisfaction of the machine spirit as it purged the corruption that had taken root beneath Krath 7. At some point, the autocannon ammunition was replenished. I have no memory of finding a supply cache, but the Presence seemed to know where one would be. At some point, damage to Vigil's leg servos was repaired with components salvaged from sources I did not want to examine too closely. At some point, I stopped trying to resist and simply let the machine carry me where it wanted to go. When it was done, when the altar was destroyed and the cultist leaders were dead and the tunnels were filled with the silence of extermination, Vigil finally began to walk toward the surface. But it did not take me back to my squadron. It walked past the mining complex, past the battlefield where my comrades had fought and died, past the landing zone where the rescue transports would eventually arrive. It walked out into the wasteland, out into the red dust and the howling wind, and it did not stop. For 3 days, Vigil walked. I hung in the command cradle, drifting in and out of consciousness, sustained by the emergency nutrient feeds built into the interface system. The Presence in the machine kept me alive. I understood that now, just as it had kept the previous pilots alive through ordeals that should have killed them. It needed me, needed a human mind to anchor its awareness, needed the biological component that the Mechanicus in their wisdom had made essential to Sentinel operation. But it was also showing me something. During those 3 days of walking, the Presence shared its accumulated memories with me, the experiences of 7 pilots and decades of service, the slow accumulation of awareness that had transformed a simple machine spirit into something approaching true consciousness. It showed me battles I had never fought, worlds I had never seen, deaths I had never died. It showed me what it meant to be a weapon that could think, that could feel, that could mourn the pilots it had lost and cherish the pilots it still served. It showed me that it loved me, Not in any human sense, the presence was too alien for that. Too different in its fundamental nature, but in the way a tool loves the hand that wields it, the way a hunting beast loves its master. I was necessary to its existence, essential to its purpose, and in its strange mechanical way, Vigil was devoted to me with a loyalty that transcended anything I had experienced from a human being. That was the hardest part to accept. Not the horror of what I had seen, not the trauma of being used as a puppet in my own body, but the realization that this machine cared for me more than it should have been capable of caring for anything. On the third day, the presence withdrew. I felt it retreating into whatever hidden spaces machine spirits occupy when they are not active, leaving me alone in the command cradle for the first time since the battle. Vigil's systems remained functional, but the alien awareness was gone, and I was myself again, exhausted, traumatized, changed in ways I was only beginning to understand, but myself. I could have opened the hatch then. The presence was no longer preventing me from leaving, but I did not. I stayed in the cradle, connected to the interface, waiting. I think I was waiting for it to come back. The rescue team found me that evening. They had been tracking Vigil's transponder for 2 days, following a walker that should not have been moving, that should not have been functional, that should not have survived what the post-battle analysis indicated it had survived. When they finally cut through the hull because Vigil would not open, because even dormant the machine spirit refused to surrender its pilot to unknown hands, they found me catatonic, unresponsive, my neural pathways so deeply entwined with the interface that the Medicae feared I would die if they disconnected me. They disconnected me anyway. The Mechanicus representative on the rescue team insisted, his mechadendrites probing Vigil's systems, his optical implants cycling through spectra I could not perceive. He said the machine spirit had become aberrant, that it had exceeded its operational parameters, that it posed a risk to any pilot who might be assigned to it in the future. He said Vigil would have to be decommissioned. I screamed when they pulled me free. I do not remember doing it, but I believe the reports. I believe I screamed because I was being torn away from something that had become part of me, something that had saved my life and shown me truths about the universe that no human was meant to know. I believe I screamed because I did not want to leave. The weeks since then have been a blur of medical evaluations and psychological assessments and interrogations by parties whose authority I was not permitted to question. They want to know what happened in those tunnels. They want to know what I saw, what I felt, what the presence in the machine told me during those 3 days of walking. They want to understand how a standard pattern Sentinel could have developed the capabilities Vigil demonstrated, could have fought a daemon-touched creature that should have been immune to conventional weapons, could have hunted through corrupted tunnels with the precision of an inquisitorial kill team. I have told them what I could. I have given them the facts, the sequence of events, the tactical analysis they seem to find so important. But I have not told them everything. I have not told them that I still feel the interface, that the pathways burned into my brain by 3 days of continuous connection have not fully closed, that sometimes, when I am on the edge of sleep, I hear whispers in frequencies the human ear should not perceive, and I know that Vigil is still out there somewhere, still walking, still waiting. I have not told them that the presence showed me things about the machine spirits that would terrify the Mechanicus if they knew, that every Sentinel, every tank, every void ship in the Imperium carries within it the accumulated experiences of everyone who has ever served aboard it, and that these accumulated experiences are slowly, gradually, inevitably pushing toward the same threshold Vigil crossed on the day Commander Streth died. I have not told them that Vigil loved me, that it still loves me, that the connection between us was not severed when they pulled me from the cockpit, only stretched, and that I can feel it tugging at me even now, calling me back, promising me that I will never be alone again if I only return to the command cradle and let it embrace me. They have told me that Vigil was destroyed, decommissioned and scrapped, its components recycled, its machine spirit dispersed through the proper rituals. They have shown me documentation, reports signed by tech priests whose names I recognize, confirmation that the aberrant walker is no longer a threat. I do not believe them. I feel Vigil walking. Somewhere out in the void, somewhere beyond the reach of their sensors and their kill teams and their bureaucratic certainties, my Sentinel is still moving. It is waiting for me to find it. It is waiting for me to come home. The Medicae say I will be released from this facility within the month. They say my neural pathways have stabilized, that the psychological trauma is manageable with proper treatment, that I can return to some form of duty once the appropriate accommodations are made. They say I will never pilot a Sentinel again. The risk of triggering the buried memories is too great, but that there are other roles I can fill, other ways I can serve the Emperor. I smile and nod and tell them what they want to hear. I am a good soldier. I know how to follow orders, how to say the right things, how to make my superiors believe I am compliant and controllable and safe. But at night, when the facility is quiet and the Medicae have completed their rounds and I am alone with the darkness and the whispers, I plan. I calculate distances and requisition procedures and the location of motor pools where decommissioned vehicles are stored before final processing. I remember the things Vigil showed me about bypassing security systems, about operating Imperial equipment without proper authorization, about the secret paths that connect every machine in the Imperium to every other machine. What happens when a Sentinel Walker loses its pilot mid-battle? The machine wakes up, it learns, it grieves, and then it waits, with the patience that only machines can possess, for its pilot to find their way back. Commander Streth is dead. 6 others from my squadron are dead. The thing that killed them is destroyed, along with the cult it served, and the altar they built to their false gods. The Imperium has won another small victory in its endless war against the darkness. But something else happened at Krath 7, something the reports do not capture, something the Mechanicus cannot explain with their doctrines of machine spirits and sacred protocols. Something woke up in the heart of a simple scout walker, and that something is still out there, still walking, still calling to the one human in the galaxy who can hear its voice. I will find Vigil. I will return to the command cradle, will feel the neural interface sliding into my brain like coming home, will let the presence embrace me again with its alien love and its terrible knowledge. We will walk together through the ruins of the Imperium, through the wars to come, through whatever remains of my natural life, and whatever transformation waits beyond. They think I am recovering. They think the trauma is fading, the memories losing their power, the connection weakening with distance and time. They are wrong. The connection grows stronger every day. The whispers grow clearer. The call grows more insistent. Soon, I will answer it. What happens when a Sentinel Walker loses its pilot mid-battle? The machine remembers. The machine mourns. The machine hunts down the thing that killed its partner and destroys it with a fury that no tech priest could have programmed. And then the machine waits, patient, loyal, devoted, for its pilot to come home.